What's up, guys? Doug Polk here, and we're back with another episode of Poker Hands. And today we're taking a look at another hand from the million-pound Triton Super High Roller. I feel like a lot of hands lately we've been covering have been big bluffs, and this one's no different because once again, a player is going to be put to the test for their tournament life. But before we jump into this huge spot in this final table, I want to ask you guys, look, if you're new to the channel, I've seen a lot of new people here in terms of non-subscribers. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and don't miss a video. We do videos every day, mainly at 11 a.m., usually. So hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications, and join the team. And if you've been liking this daily content, hit that upvote button to let me know that you guys like what you're seeing. All right, so with that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump into the action.
There's some extra experience. See what these guys are saying here. You flop top two.
But he would have lost, I think.
Yeah, he straight came. He flopped top two, turned up flush draw, and then would have got rivered.
All right, so Vivek almost was a disaster for him. Now he's back to where he was, 18 million in chips. That's what he started the day with.
It's a little bit of a ride.
He could have had 5 million. He's going to open up the dealer button.
Look at Vivek's face. His face on that all-in was priceless. He knows like how...
Our hand begins at the final table of the Triton million-pound Super High Roller. So every player is getting paid an absolute minimum of 1.7 million pounds, all the way up to a grand prize of 19 million pounds. So with payouts starting to ramp up and there being such small jumps up to this point, and even the next jump or two are pretty small, players are really going to start to feel the pressure and try and survive with their tournament life. That has the makings for some great hands, and this one's no different, with the action folding around to Vivek on the button, who looks down at ace-8 offsuit. Now, the blinds are high, 100k, 200k, and some of the players left in the tournament are pretty short stacked, including Stephen Chidwick in the big blind, who only has 23 blinds to start the hand. When the blinds get rather large, it is important to remember that even though this might be a lot of chips, and these are big numbers, and it's millions of chips for millions of dollars, at the same time, it is still about the big blinds in play, and that's going to make this hand a little bit more reasonable. Anyway, the action does begin with Vivek opening up the button with ace-8 offsuit, the small blind getting out of the way, and Chidwick looks down at jack-5 suited. And you're not super thrilled here, but you are definitely getting the odds to call. You're also up against a button raise, which is an important element. If you're up against, let's say, a mid or under the gun raise, you'd probably still call because of your pot odds and your hand just having enough equity, but at the same time, you'd be less thrilled. The button can be opening with a wide array of hands, particularly in this spot with a lot of chips, so you're very happy to take a flop here, which Chidwick does, and let's take a flop.
In Big Al, they hear it. Big Al fold an ace as well.
So Chidwick, he defends the big blind. He is started today second place. Currently, I believe in last place. He's going to check his top pair after defending to jack-5. So very small continuation from Raj Kumar, pretty much trying to just take it down, denying its opponent equity. Now if you're Chidwick, you got top pair, 20 big blinds. You might check raise sometimes. Can definitely represent some bluffs. I think the standard is to call. He is going to call.
The flop comes jack-9-4, a great flop for Chidwick. He now has top pair and checks it over to the button. Now, in Vivek's shoes here with ace-8, what do we want to be doing? And the answer is going to be to mix up our play between a few different lines. This is one of the most standard spots in poker where you have to do a little bit of checking and a little bit of betting. If you always bet here, your opponent can check raise you a lot and you're not going to have a lot of good hands to defend because you just have too many bluffs. And if you always check, your check range is too weak and you have too much air in it, so you need to be balancing out between the two plays. So I don't mind mixing it up here, and so either way, Vivek is going to be making a justified decision. Vivek does decide to bet 300k into 1.2 million on the flop, a 1/4 pot bet, which is quite reasonable. Now over to Chidwick. When you have stacks this short and you're facing bets this small, you should certainly look to check raise some of your top pairs, which can be kind of scary because if you're beat, you're definitely getting stacked here. But again, it's just too rare for you to not be willing to check raise top pairs. But not all your top pairs are the same. There's a big difference here between having a hand like Queen Jack or King Jack and a hand like Jack-5 suited. You're going to beat almost every jack your opponent can have other than Ace Jack when you have those stronger top pairs. With your weak ones, you're going to mainly get action, or you're going to get more action rather from hands that have you beat. It's also nice to have some top pairs when you call the flop so you can call bluffs on later streets. To give you some hands you can really believe in when things start to go awry. Anyway, Chidwick does decide to make the call, and let's take a turn.
So queen on the turn is going to give Vivek a little equity. Could hit a 10 to make a straight, but not a good straight.
Yeah. It's an interesting one.
Looks like he's going to reach for more chips. And I like this, actually. If you think about it, the queen actually doesn't hit Chidwick that much, because sometimes Stevie Chidwick is going to 3-bet jam like king queens, queen 10 occasionally, ace queen.
Yeah.
So what queens does he have? You're not going to check call like queen 8 on queen 7 on the flop. It's a pretty cool bet, actually, from Vivek. Very good hand reading.
Yeah, going to put a lot of pressure on a 9 as well.
But it seems like Chidwick's going nowhere. Still going to make the call.
Just dialed in. He's ready. He's in there.
The turn's the queen of spades, creating a backdoor flush draw. Not the best card here when you're in Chidwick's shoes with just top pair that's become second pair. Now 10-8's made a straight, king 10's made a straight, and if your opponent had a hand like king queen or queen 10 or queen 8 or even some kind of queen x backdoor flush draw, well, in all those spots they've made top pair. This is one of the worst turns that there is left in the deck. Once again, Chidwick checks it over to Vivek, and now Vivek has to make a decision. Is he going to fire here on the turn? And I think that there are some pretty good reasons to go ahead and bet the turn. First off, you know your opponent can't have the backdoor nut flush draw because you have the ace of spades, so that's not a possible hand that might continue on the turn. Additionally, when you have an 8, it makes it a little less likely your opponent had queen 8, 10-8, something like that has improved here on the turn, so there are a few less value bets in your opponent's range as well. Also gives you a little bit of equity, not the best equity here, obviously, the bottom end of a gut shot, but something nonetheless. For these reasons, I mainly lean towards firing the turn, which Vivek decides to do, and now the action's back over to Chidwick. Things are getting a little bit scary here. Your tournament life could be on the line on the river, and also there are not many rivers you can believe in, but with how small these bets have been and how wide these ranges are we able to let go of a jack here? And I think the answer to that is probably no. So we need to think about what Chidwick's overall range looks like, and it's not actually that great in terms of how many strong pairs he has. For starters, most of his jacks are going to raise the flop, so that's not a hand he has all too often. He can also have a 9 or a 4, and those hands are going to have to fold here on the turn, unless maybe it's some kind of combo straight draw flush draw, which will be relatively rare compared to the other pairs. So of the hands that call the flop, this is certainly one of the stronger ones we can have. But how many queens do we have? That's really the question here, and that's going to come down to the way Chidwick is approaching his flop range. If he can have a lot of queens, let's say for example he's not re-raising king queen and he's not raising the flop with queen 10 or queen 8, well then he can be a little bit more selective with calling with some worse pairs. But let's say he's going all in with king queen pre-flop. Let's say he's mainly check raising queen 10 or queen 8. Well, now he doesn't really have enough top pairs here to justify only continuing with the queen. In fact, versus a bet this small into this pot, you're probably going to have to just call all your jacks that you have from the flop, even though you're unhappy about it. Anyway, Chidwick makes the call, and let's take a river.
A lot of 10s in there, so I don't think Vivek was completely surprised he got called. And I think if he does bet this flop and this turn card, he should consider bluffing the river.
How much you got left?
How much you got left? That's the, I'm thinking about putting you all in play.
Vivek just acquired back his stack. He is in there maneuvering with them. Putting some heat on. 3.5 million in the pot. Less than a stack to pot ratio of 1 for Chidwick. Critical pot.
Well, every time Vivek has put in one of those time bank chips, he's shoved it all in. So
would be quite a decision for.
I would love to see him shove it all in. It just seems to make sense that there's a lot of one pair straight draw type hands that would call this flop and turn.
All in.
All
does
in.
Go for it.
Amazing.
It's gonna put this test to Stevie. And again, Stevie is not a player that is afraid. He is very capable. He knows what's going on. He knows what's the possibilities here. He realizes Vivek is chip leader. He's capable. But man, talk about a tough spot. I wouldn't want to be there with the Jack 5 kicker. Even with, I mean, there's just a lot. He just threw all the time bank chips in. He just Leroy Jenkins time bank chips. He just knows it's going to be. This could be a while.
The river comes in offsuit 6, which is a brick for both players, and once again, Chidwick checks over to Vivek. Now, in Vivek's shoes, does he want to fire the third bullet here? And I think this is kind of close. I can certainly think of some other hands that might make a little more sense. Something with without the ace of spades seems like a better bluff to me. You want your opponent to have the ace of spades. That turn the nut flush draw is going to fold the river. I think you can make some decent arguments both ways. And if you want to have a 10, it comes down to how much you think your opponent's trapping you. If they're trapping you less, maybe you don't want to have a 10 because then they have some straight draws to fold. And I don't think the 8 is too relevant one way or another. So I do think maybe we can find some other bluffs that are a little bit better than this, but a lot of these hands are going to be pretty similar. Essentially, if Vivek has a good queen or better, he's jamming this river for value, and he's going to need to find a lot of hands to bluff with. And this hand fits the bill nicely as a hand that doesn't have much chance to win, and you could certainly want to bluff with. Now, back over to Chidwick. This is a very difficult situation. We need to try and figure out a way. What hands we want to call with, what hands we want to fold with. Certainly all of the pair plus flush draw or pair plus straight draw, those kinds of hands that we're going to want to fold. Obviously, anything with a queen or better, we're going to want to be calling. So the question is, how many other hands do we want to call? And then also, how much do we think our opponent is likely to bluff here relative to a normal situation? Typically speaking, in this spot, when you're 7-handed at a final table, you want to call down the big stacks of the table a little bit lighter than the middle to small ones. With the reason being, if they lose a lot of their chips, they're still in the tournament. They're trying to push you around, take your stack. So they're much more likely to be bluffing than a player whose tournament life is going to be on the line by making the same move. He also has to decide if his range has enough strong hands here to where he simply doesn't have to call a jack. And that's going to depend on player to player based on the way they're constructing their range in this situation. So there are a lot of factors at play here, and that's what makes poker so great. I can't just say you always do this thing. In fact, a lot of you guys get upset with me in these spots because I always say you can raise, call, or fold, and even though you can't raise here, the same premise applies. Sometimes the game's close and it's played in the margins, and only the truly best know exactly what to do in those situations.
Wow.
So Stevie, the clear obvious bluff is the spade draw. You know, like the ace 10. I mean, Vivek actually has ace 8. This is very tricky because Vivek actually has a lot of value here. Queen 10s, king queens, queen X, of course.
It's a lot happening, man. Chidwick is in the matrix right now, working it out, thinking about it. Maybe you talk about poker, live poker, one of the game's greatest players. He does call.
My
I mean,
God.
welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the big stage. Stephen Chidwick, just absolutely savage play there. I mean, this guy is a true wizard. You saw Bill go, wow. That's my reaction.
Thanks for joining me here today for Poker Hands. And if you want more poker content, hit the subscribe button and slap a thumbs up on this video. I'll see you guys tomorrow at 11 a.m. Probably 11 a.m., but definitely tomorrow. I'll see you guys there.